Good. So I've got one of the professors here, Professor David Smythe, who's Emeritus Professor at Glasgow University and former member of the rock group Resilio.
The Resillos.
The Resillos. I'm terribly sorry for my age. Yeah. Anyway, that went down well this evening. Professor, is there any prospect of the geology here being suitable for the storage?
No.
None at all?
No.
And why is that? If you could praise it, I know you've given us a long lecture.
The high mountains, primary objection, and the complex geology.
And the high mountains means that there's a severe problem of water getting in, possibly getting in.
The rapid groundwater flow
is
what kills that. And the one area right at the north, up in the Solway Plain, the rocks are wrong. Although it's fairly simple geology, and it's far enough away from the mountains, the rock type just isn't up to it.
And you're not out on a limb on this, in that, I mean, they're taking it all very seriously, the government. They're having this consultation. The British Geological Survey say we need...
They try to tar me as some kind of rebel or renegade. But in fact, once you've got the inquiry inspector and his assessor and Stuart, we are four serious people.
That's Professor Stuart Hazeldine from Edinburgh University.
Yeah. Right. Then you could say we're in the majority, and Dearlove, who after all is partial because he's paid good money by the...
He's the consultant for the project.
He's the guy out on the run.
I did notice one thing, that you, in your enthusiasm, you were straying from geology onto other subjects like the engineering of the capsules and so on, and Professor Hazeldine was talking about the local member of parliament and kind of disparaging manner and the politics of it and so on. I can imagine some people might think, these guys they've made up their minds not just on geology. Would that be unfair?
That is unfair, because I used to be in favour of all this 20 years ago, and I did a big contract for NIREX on a three-dimensional seismic survey, and I was all keen on it until I found out how complex that area was. So I then appeared at the planning inquiry against NIREX as a witness for Friends of the Earth. What was the rest of the question?
Well, no, that's covered it, I think, really. It was just, rather than it being a sort of academic study of geology, it was a bit more kind of partisan than that.
We have to stray into the other things, because if the engineers say, the geology doesn't really matter, we can engineer it.
Then you've got to counter that.
For geological periods of time, then that becomes our remit.
Yes.
And the nonsense of a canister being safe for 1 million years, that was a very telling point, I think.
Yeah.
But that only came out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's after 35 years research by the Swedes.
And like John from the campaign here, he made it very clear, which I think is important to narrow like this, that he's not anti-nuclear, and that's the same with yourself. I mean, you're not anti-nuclear power.
I am now, actually, but I didn't used to be.
Yeah.
In fact, when I played in the Resillos, they were doing a benefit gig to stop the Torness nuclear power station being opened. And I refused to play in that gig because I was in favour of nuclear power. So they had to get the sax player to play bass instead of me. So I've had a track record of gradually, let's say, changing my mind about things like that. But the more I learn about the nuclear industry, the more I